The Colorado River system provides water to 40 million people across the West, from Denver to LA to Mexico. But after more than 2 decades of drought, water levels have reached historic lows, and competition for the remaining water between countries, between states, even between neighbors is growing fierce. Brooke Silva Braga traveled to one Arizona community that could lose access to the Colorado within weeks.
Drive just north of Scottsdale and you'll find a loose grid of dirt roads known as the Rio Verde foothills. 2,000 homes enjoying rustic desert beauty and the freedom of living outside the city limits. But Rio Verde now finds itself at the center of the West's growing water crisis.
I never thought I would actually be in a position where this community, it could crumble.
John Hornewer moved here 23 years ago, discovered his new community didn't have water service, and stumbled onto a new career.
The wells in my area are questionable at best, so I just opted to grab a trailer and haul my own water.
And then did someone say, hey, could you grab some for me?
Exactly. As my neighbors saw me coming up the road with the trailer, they're like, hey, did you stop and drop off wood for me?
Once every 4 to 6 weeks, tops off my tank.
More than a quarter of Rio Verde relies on hauled water.
And the tank actually runs from here to over here.
Karen Nabity bought here in 2014.
Yeah, we had talked to a lot of neighbors, and they've been doing it for 50 years. And it wasn't a big deal. We weren't concerned about it at that time.
But times have changed as the Colorado River system has dried up. The pipe where Hornewer gets water belongs to the city of Scottsdale. And after years of warning Rio Verde they should find another source, in 6 weeks, on January 1st, Scottsdale is cutting off water to Rio Verde.
I expected to live out here for the rest of my life, and now I actually question whether here is going to be there for the rest of my life.
Hornewer can make a 2-hour round trip to another source, but it's so far away, state law might not allow it. A regional water utility says it has a solution, but needs at least 2 years before it will be ready. So maybe Scottsdale will just keep the pipe open? Here's Scottsdale Mayor David Ortega.
Why not just let those few people keep the water for a little longer?
They should manage their own destiny with their own water. Right now, they are trucking water, burning diesel to supply themselves, which we do not support.
They're about to burn more diesel because they're going to have to truck it from farther away.
That's their problem.
Scottsdale has its own problem. The northern part of the city gets 90% of its water from the shrinking Colorado.
The constant decline of the water source is reality.
Yeah.
We have to adapt, and then we have to adapt more, and we have to adapt more.
To understand what faces the West, consider some basic math. By law, 7 states and Mexico are allocated in total 16.5 million acre-feet of Colorado River water each year. But these days, only about 11 million acre-feet are actually flowing. And so the big collection points of the river, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are draining like bathtubs.
If you look out 2 years, Lake Powell could go so low that it's essentially dry.
Tom Bishatsky runs Arizona's water department.
What that would mean if we hit that is no water in the river through the Grand Canyon.
For starters, he says, temporary drastic cuts are needed to stabilize the system. But even then, the reduced flow of the river is unlikely to change.
It's still snowing and raining 80, 90, 100% of what it did historically. But instead of that turning into water that goes into the river, the water's disappearing.
Wait, what does that mean? Where's it going?
We're getting 40 or 60% of that water going into the river.
So at 90% of the snowfall, 40% of the water.
And so it's happening because the soil is much drier because it's been hotter. The snow is melting sooner, and trees and other vegetation are growing earlier in the year because of the warming climate. And it's probably the single biggest challenge that we have in managing the river moving into the future.
But the water is not coming back.
It is highly unlikely.
This summer, the federal government asked the states to sort out a deal to cut out as much as a quarter of their use. The states couldn't agree. The water rights have a legal pecking order, and California, which uses the most, has the right to take its cuts last. Meanwhile, Arizona has built infrastructure to store extra water underground and has banked a few years' worth. So why would they take voluntary cuts when they could just be banking more for the future?
And so it really complicates the ability to do something collaboratively.
On the one hand, situation's not good. On the other hand, the politics of truly addressing it are just real hard.
Yes, they are. That's a good summary of all of it.
Consider the politics of water pricing, a fraction of a cent per gallon even in the desert, yet rate increases face major opposition. Or the politics of construction in Rio Verde. Even lots with no water are still guaranteed building permits by the pro-growth state government. And consider the politics of lawns in Scottsdale. Even though most residential water is used outside the home, the same city cutting the tap to neighboring Rio Verde hasn't issued any watering restrictions on itself. But none of that would solve the problem. Not even cutting off all water to every home in Arizona would solve the problem, because 70% of the state's water is used for farming.
Farmers want to be here, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to hang on and stay here.
But the politics of cutting water to farmers like Nancy Kaywood aren't easy either. In many cases, they have the oldest water rights in the region and have already been taking cuts.
We don't want to start depending on other countries for our food and fiber.
Even understanding that, it does seem like there might be another part of the country where it'd be easier and maybe even more sensible to grow crops.
Go try to plant your lettuce, cabbage, cauliflower, all those winter crops in Minnesota. Nobody's going to get salads, you know?
This all takes us back to the tangled politics of Rio Verde. According to Maricopa County Supervisor Thomas Galvin, a temporary solution has been found. The utility company EPCOR could send water through Scottsdale's system for Rio Verde's use. The catch is Scottsdale needs to agree.
We just hope that Mayor Ortega can help these folks in a spirit of cooperation now that the solution has been found to facilitate it.
I am not equivocating. That's not going to happen. They'll add another 1,000 homes out there. They'll think, well, Scottsdale has got to be compassionate and give us the... That's not good enough. They're going to have to find their own solution.
Is there any solution that doesn't involve Scottsdale letting you use their standpipe?
At the moment, no.
So, 6 more weeks of water for 500 American homes, with more being built even as the pipe runs dry. Do you anticipate there being other communities like that facing this in the years ahead?
Based on the pioneer attitude that still exists in Arizona, it's going to continue to happen.
For CBS Saturday Morning, Brooke Silva Brackett, just outside Scottsdale, Arizona.